Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Astrology Now, your cosmic compass for navigating the planetary rhythms shaping our lives with a touch of stardust. I'm your host, Cheryl Gottschall, and I'm joined by astrologer Babula Clement. And today we're diving into the fascinating energies of the new moon in Gemini. And there's a lot going on. There's a lunar reset that invites us to refresh our minds, redefine our stories, and reconnect with the power of words. So, as many of you know, Gemini is the sign of curiosity, communication, and connection, ruled by Mercury. It's all about the exchange of ideas and clever conversation, which Babula and I both hope to have, and mental agility. So in this episode, we'll dive more deeply into what this new moon has in store for us and take a look at what other planets are currently pushing and shoving to steal the limelight from her. And there's a few. So grab your favourite notebook, a cup of chai, and let's tune in to the messages carried on Gemini's winds. So, Babula, this week we have stepped into a powerful threshold of change where a long story ends and a new one begins, haven't we?
We certainly have, and I'm certain that you're referring to Saturn's entrance into Aries.
Yes. Yeah, it's
It,
big.
it yeah, it's really big and significant, and we can't really. That happened, by the way, on the 25th of May in the afternoon in Brisbane time, um, and of course the Saturn cycle, as most people who have even a remote interest in astrology will know. A Saturn cycle is around 29 years. It's when
Yeah.
we have our first Saturn return and so
Yeah.
on. So what we're looking at as Saturn moves into Aries and has just begun that process, it's actually completed or we're in the process of completing, a long journey through the entire zodiac
Mm,
and has been in Pisces these last 2.5 years.
mm,
The last sign of the zodiac, where there's a lot of clearing and endings and completion and karmic resolutions going on, which isn't always an easy process. Um, in order to sort of clear the decks, if you like, for something fresh and new to emerge through Aries.
mm.
But of course, Saturn's entrance into Aries is not going to stay in Aries just yet. I think I made it. Yes, I did. It will retrograde and then go back into Pisces in early September. So from now through for these next few months through to early September, Saturn will be in Aries, goes back into September, and then in January it will go back into Aries and stay there through till April 2028. So we're getting a glimpse now over these next few months, a taste of what it might be like in these next couple of years with Saturn going through Aries. And of course, they're very, very different energies.
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, Aries is all fire and go. It's the green light of the zodiac, on your marks, ready, set, go, sort of an energy to push through and um, just get things moving. It's a sign of new beginnings and birth and getting things started. It's the great starting engine of the zodiac.
Yeah.
And then Saturn moves in, who's got a very different vibe to that indeed. So it's complex, and we can come up with images like, imagine someone driving a really high-powered red sports car, and they keep coming to red lights, the frustration of that. But I just want to go, which is
Yeah.
Aries nature.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it doesn't take too kindly to those kind of constraints and impositions of control and restriction that Saturn tends to operate with.
Mhm. Aries is hello world, like you say, it's about birthing something, something coming into being. And Saturn
Yeah,
says, well, your life is fairly long. Just take it easy and let's. So they've got this birth of a whole new world with no map yet, but that's what Saturn's there for, I think, is going to give that structure. and that audit
Yes,
is new, whatever it is. But at the same time, that Aries energy is all about, well, it's up for grabs, and we're just going to redefine things because the way that we've done things in the past, because as you say, it's the end of that cycle. Um, we're going to do it my way, right?
exactly. My way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we're going to redefine our visions of success or society's expectations. We're not going to live up to them. We're going to, fulfill our life the way we want to, the way that we're going to live it the way we want to live it. Yeah.
That's right. And what Saturn's very masterful at as he goes through each sign, and we've all been through the ringer with it going through Pisces, emotionally, psychically, energetically, in all those ways. Saturn tests us every step of the way. We are constantly being tested and having to reevaluate and really consider, what's the most important thing for me here? Maybe that needs to go, that needs to go, that needs to go, because I have to focus and discipline all my energies here. And so we can think of Aries as the warrior energy. And it's very head first. You're talking about the birth canal and the baby being born. In most cases, the baby comes out head first, and Aries rules the head, and it's very, it just impulsively dives in head first. But Saturn is sort of, I think, kind of training that impulsive warrior nature to just charge forth. I think if we think of ourselves as in training, and maybe even on a physical level, how we all say, yeah, yeah, I'm going to go to the gym. Yeah, yeah, I'm going to go to the gym. Or I'm going to do those exercises at home every day that I've been following online but haven't been doing. This could well be, a perfect metaphor, and in some cases very real,
Mm,
um, a time to really see ourselves as warriors, in inverted commas, whatever that means, in training, and we have to pace ourselves because Saturn's the Lord of time, isn't he? Like it's
exactly.
going to take time. You're not going to get an instant result, but the general movement and momentum is forward, but we
Yeah.
have to pace it.
Yeah. It's a time of initiation in one
Yeah,
way, because it's something new. But Saturn says it's also a time of mastery, so no rush because mastery of anything takes time. So we have to invest our time to do the work for the long-term payoff, which is Saturn talking.
yeah,
And while Aries wants to work on our terms, you know, we will still do what we want to do, but we have to do the work to get to
that's
the
right.
result.
That's right. And to accomplish the goal that Aries is charging towards, yeah, it takes time, it takes patience, it takes developing skills. And of course, Saturn in the end is to you use the word mastery, is about mastery and wisdom that can only be gained through life experiences and life's challenges. And so in Aries, it's going to be all about that impulse and the frustration of like, can't we just be done with this and get it over and done with now? And it's going to take a bit of time. I was we kind of pulled up the Karate Kid the other day for the kids. And it sort of reminds me of that, how the lovely old Japanese man, was his name Miyagi, something like that, took this kid under his wing and trained him slowly, slowly. The kid was so frustrated. He wanted to learn martial arts like in a week. But, he just took him step by painful step through that until he did become brilliant at it. That's very Saturn in Aries. And I was looking up a few people who were born with Saturn in Aries who demonstrate a warrior spirit, but they've had to overcome lots of obstacles and challenges in the process. Malala, I'm going to try and pronounce her last name correctly or close to correctly. Yusufa, Yusufzai. She was born in Iran, I think it was. Remember, she was shot for
Oh, in the
wanting
face?
wanting to be educated. She was shot in the head, which is
Oh, yeah.
Aries.
Yeah, that's right.
She survived and has gone on to live quite an extraordinary
Mm,
life and has become a symbol for, courage and determination. She has Saturn in Aries.
mm,
It's that I'm not going to give up.
mm.
And it takes a certain warrior spirit. Germaine Greer, has endured in her life a lot of slings and arrows and ridicule, but, a warrior. Um, Nureyev, to achieve the heights and fame and success he did, he had to make a very bold move and leave his country of origin, which wouldn't have been easy.
Yeah,
Florence Nightingale,
yeah.
against all odds, look what she did at a time when women had very little status. Tina Turner, overcame a very difficult early life. And it's that kind of fortitude and guts that Aries has that I think Saturn will be very helpful. One will be easy. Aries doesn't like Saturn being there, but it's that kind of quality, I think, that Oscar Schindler as well,
Don't know
you
that
know,
person.
over, yeah, overcoming great odds to really, with a lot of courage. So I like that idea very much about Saturn in Aries. And maybe some will be called up to positions of leadership reluctantly, whatever that might look like.
Mm, mm.
You
Yeah, also want to talk about Saturn as the planet of karma, where we have a reality check, I guess, about actions facing consequences. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry, having consequences.
yeah,
So it's sort of like a time for us to grow up and face that fact. So what we've done, if this action equals that outcome, that sort of thing. So it's initiation into that another phase of our development in responsibility, and personal responsibility, I think. So a baby wants to stay in the womb of Pisces, but when Saturn moves into Aries, that energy, it acts as the parent that kicks the fledgling out of the nest to go forth into the world, to explore it and grow into maturity and become who you are.
yeah. Absolutely. And that's both an individual process and now with Saturn here, it'll be a collective process. You talked about a karmic responsibility to face up to the consequences of the negative side of Aries, which is war, conflict, fight, and aggression
Yeah,
and domination.
yeah. I was
Yeah,
thinking the other day too, um, when Saturn was in Pisces, there was some type of project or identity, personal identity or energy anyway, was gestating inside us. But now that Saturn has moved into Aries, it's like ready to emerge. And I actually said the other day to someone, I feel like, like not knowing about where I'm going, my life has changed recently and I'm not sure about which direction to take. And I said, I just feel like something's growing inside of me and it's ready to emerge. I thought
right.
then when I was thinking about it more, I thought, now I know why.
Gestating in the Pisces womb.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And so it feels like over these next few months, I think it only gets to 1.5 or maybe 2 degrees of Aries and then goes back into Pisces. But this glimpse we get for a few months is a bit like, when a woman's giving birth, it feels like it's so close, and she wants to push, but the baby's not quite ready yet, but
Yeah,
maybe they can see it crowning and oh, it's coming now, and but no, not yet. And it might even withdraw a little bit, we're not ready, I'm not quite ready.
the buggers.
But not until, and this is so Saturn. I see this again and again over the years. It's not until the time is right,
Yeah,
and so I would say, from early next year when Saturn does then re-enter Aries and then continue on its way through Aries,
yeah,
um, it'll be okay, right, here we are. Here we go
yeah.
into something very new, but we'll get real taste of that in the coming months. So it's great. I'm noticing it in my life and my personal world. I'm really noticing something has changed
Mm, mm.
significantly.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing a lot of people say that when I write things on Facebook, I always read the comments. It's interesting to see what people are experiencing.
Yeah.
I'm hearing that people are feeling different.
Yeah. I guess in a way it's a time to build confidence and courage,
Mm,
to trust in our long-term path. And that's not always going to be easy. And there's probably going to be frustration with Saturn there,
yep.
or self-doubt or fear of failure and all that sort of stuff, because Saturn, it can be very cautious.
Mm,
But I think those opportunities will arise, and it just depends on what choices we make, doesn't it?
yeah,
Mm.
that's right. And then we always have to deal with the results of whatever choices we make and
Yes,
go from there.
exactly.
That's right. And change direction if that's what's required,
Yeah.
which is what Gemini's excellent at, of course. So, so we're in the, shall we go on to the Gemini new moon?
Yeah. Are you going to talk about Mercury moving into Gemini now? Or?
Yeah, so yes, I was just looking at that. So the day before the Gemini new moon,
Mm.
on the 26th, Mercury, happily for Mercury, moves into Gemini. And I say happily because, as most people will know, that's the sign that he rules. And so whenever a planet's in its own sign, it's pretty happy. It's
Yeah.
pretty happy to be there. And it's got a lot of power there because it can just be fully itself and doesn't have to adapt and adjust to the energies of a sign that it's not so familiar with. Or
Yeah.
it's like when we're in a stranger's home and we don't really know them so well.
Yeah.
So
I like
Mercury,
it. My
yeah,
moon's in Gemini. I like it.
right, yes, 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 yes. Gemini loves that exciting stimulation of anything new and different.
Hmm.
So Mercury's in Gemini the day before the actual new moon. So the new moon is quite close to the planet Mercury. So it's a very mercurial
Hmm.
new moon occurring on the 27th, which is Tuesday in Australia, at 1:02 minutes p.m. Eastern Standard Time,
Hmm.
Australian Eastern Standard Time. So, and it's at 6 degrees of Gemini, which just happens to sit right on my midheaven exactly.
Hmm.
So sometimes, these lunations will directly impact our own chart, precisely. And that's why people respond to these new and full moons differently.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's not always going to impact everyone the same way, of course.
Hmm.
Um, so planting new seeds, what's Gemini all about? Well, you well know it's your moon.
I do. The realm of communication and ideas,
Yeah,
social dynamics.
yes, and the constant change and flux, and it's a very busy sign, isn't it?
Yeah, very. Yeah. I've had a busy week.
Yes, exactly. And so we're going to be certainly mentally very busy, can be socially busy, can be just busy with a lot of running around and appointments, and you go here and you go there, and now there's this meeting and that phone call. It's that kind of thing. Gemini thrives on that. It does that naturally.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
bored easily.
Well, curiously, I think when did the sun go into Gemini?
On the 21st of
Earth,
May.
yeah. So I wrote two articles the last week for a magazine. So I was really busy with writing, and ideas, thinking about what I was writing about too.
Yeah,
So it's a really good time for that, if that's what you
yeah, it
want.
is.
Also for speaking and speaking your truth, I suppose, or not with forked tongue like Gemini can. Um, but it's like you said before, it's an ideal time around, well, Gemini wants to know everything, so it's an ideal time around learning something new too, isn't it?
It really is very stimulating to the mind. People with planets in Gemini very happily sit in any kind of class,
Yeah,
and they're engaged as long as the subject and the teacher or the presenter keeps it really interesting and stimulating.
absolutely.
Gemini's as happy as could be. You know,
Yeah.
if it's a bit dull and boring and tedious, they've lost interest very quickly.
You know,
Um,
oh, sorry, go on.
Go on, no, go on.
I was just going to say, I think um, sometimes I myself, well, I maybe not so much as a writer, I've been writing for years and years, but sometimes I think Gemini is a little bit underrated in that, people think, well, the energy is light, but it's about communication. So the impact of our words and mindset can be profound. So, um, and the moon reminds us that sometimes the most powerful shift begins with a simple change of thought, too, right? So
Yeah,
but it relates to words, and whether they're written or spoken, they can change the world around us. And I was thinking about Masaru Emoto, who discovered
mm,
that words spoken can change the chemistry of water, and we're made up of 80% water, so words change our physiology too. So I think in Emoto's experiments, he got a group of, one of the experiments was to have a pack of the individual water bottles all together, and people were saying harsh words to that, and then they were saying positive word and loving words to another thing of water, and he looked at that under the microscope and saw that the chemical structure was changed. So
yeah,
um, kind words can heal, and harsh, hateful words, they can create illness. So the
yeah,
power of that is that it could be said that death and life are in the power of the tongue, you know. So, and I was thinking then of JFK's speech at Rice University in the early 60s, and he said, we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do other things, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And that's endured, hasn't it? Those words just sort of have trickled on through
exactly.
history. And the same with Martin Luther King. I think he said, I have a dream that one day, oh, that's right. I'm not saying think, I looked it up. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. And then he listed all the positive changes that he dreamed.
Mm,
And those words of those people and people like them, they're very powerful,
yes.
and they're like an arrow following the arrow of time from history to the future. And I'm sure they'll be quoted for years and decades to come yet again because they touch on something really important to humans.
That they do, and they resonate because one of the things Mercury and Gemini are about, it's about making connections. You know, like even in the body, Mercury governs the nervous system, and the nervous system is connecting everything up. On a cellular level, cells are communicating with each other through all the little nerve endings. And there's this incredible system of communication going on inside. And I came across an amazing phrase this morning from esoteric astrology that I might have read it before, but I didn't really take it on board. And it's Gemini is the light of interplay.
Mm,
And I thought, what an amazing phrase. And it's all about the relationships within the duality of everything, because Gemini's a sign of duality. And we know that twins are born in the month of Gemini. Whenever there's twins in a family, you'll see the sign of Gemini showing up in that family system big time. Um, and so Geminis are able to hold a myriad of different thoughts and ideas and possibilities. And some people think that that just means they're fickle and they're not truthful and so on and so on. But they do actually have a capacity to hold many different polarities all at once, a bit like a juggler, juggling all these different thought forms. Um, and I think sometimes a really good speaker and orator is speaking very spontaneously with great intelligence in the moment, in response to the moment and to the energy of the people they're speaking to in that moment. And that's a very Gemini, beautiful, positive, evolved quality to me. And it's very highly intuitive, and I know you do that. I've seen you do that. It's just very present and responds with language and words in that moment. Yeah, it's fascinating. And I love that this phrase includes light, the light of interplay, because it is a light sign. It's not a heavy sign. It's not a heavy energy. And Geminis will sometimes say, if I know lots of Geminis, if a conversation is getting a bit intense, which some people love and adore, I don't mind the odd intense conversation myself. But the Gemini will be like, oh, for God's sake, would you just lighten up?
Yes.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is getting too heavy.
Yeah. If you think about the opposite sign, Sagittarius, like they're quite happy to speak about deep philosophical things, you know. And
Yeah.
Gemini's not. It's different.
Yeah, Gemini wants to keep it really light and playful and fun, and that carries great medicine as well.
Mm,
That playful, very sort of playful, fun quality that it's so fascinating to me. All the signs carry medicine, and we're often quick to judge certain signs,
yeah.
but we've got to look, deeply at all the different qualities of these signs.
Mm,
Um, So yes, so the Gemini new moon is at 6 degrees of Gemini. Mercury, so there it is there, the sun and the moon. And even the sun and the moon being together is interesting because there you've got two polar opposites. You've got the union of, we could call it the masculine principle of spirit of the sun, the feminine light of the soul, the moon. They come together. There's a marriage, there's a sacred marriage. Interestingly, when I say that, in the world of alchemy, the old, very old texts of alchemy and the images, all the images of alchemy always show an image of the sun and the moon, and the symbol for Mercury is always present. There's this thing about Mercury as a bridging energy between opposites, seeming opposites, making connections, and what happens when connections are made. When you have a great conversation with someone, you might have just met them and you're just on the same wavelength immediately and you feel like you've known each other forever.
yes. Yeah. Just resonate.
That happens with, yeah, it's a Mercury thing.
Yes. Yeah. Very interesting, isn't
Yeah.
it?
So have some great conversations during this period, folks,
Yeah.
because it can be really fantastic. So where do we go from here? So on the day of the new moon, we did touch on this a bit last time. I think we said we'd talk about it more today. Chiron, which has been slowly moving through Aries for some years now, um, makes an exact conjunction with Eris,
Mm.
Eris, at 25 degrees of Aries. See, Eris in Aries. Eris has been in Aries for over 100 years. It's
Wow.
so, I know, it's one of those what we call the new planets way out there in the Kuiper belt out beyond Pluto. They started to be discovered around 2005. And so it has a very long, long orbit and is slowly making its way towards the end of Aries. And I know you are interested in Eris as well. She's called the goddess of chaos and discord.
Yeah.
So she's regarded as a troublemaker, right?
Yeah.
And she literally upsets the apple cart. That wonderful myth of she turns up uninvited to a wedding. All the beautiful, you can imagine sort of the Hollywood set, and or just the beautiful people don't invite her because she's trouble.
Yeah.
And sometimes people who have a very strong Eris placement in their chart, they may have experienced that. They may have experienced a sense of being left out and
Mm.
not included because you might be seen as a bit of a stirrer, or a bit uh, confrontational or something like that. So
Yeah.
what does Eris do? She turns up anyway, as she would. So she offers a golden apple to the goddess who is judged the most beautiful of all at this um, wedding.
Mm.
and that sets in motion a chain of events that exposes the the kind of greed and the more sort of shallow side, if you like, of these people, who vie to be chosen the most beautiful of all and get the golden apple. And
Mm.
long chain of events happen, and it results in the Trojan War and the sacking of Troy. So it's a dramatic story, and she's often seen in a very negative light, but she serves a great purpose. She exposes and reveals. She's like a whistleblower, a troubleshooter.
Yes, in so many ways.
Yeah. And she'll sort of tear things open, like you need to look at this.
Yeah, and then you team that up with Chiron, and then you've got
Exactly.
this sort of, you've got Eris being, provoking something,
Yeah.
aggravation or something like that,
Yeah.
from your own wounds.
That's right. And exposing wounds. And
Yeah.
I think as I was thinking about it, I just sort of made a couple of notes. It can really dredge up old wounds,
Yes.
and it can really trigger old resentment and frustration and anger. Then it can be a bit explosive at times. It's in the sign of Aries, um, but it is about exposing wounds and maybe bringing something right to the surface that hasn't been fully addressed or dealt with because something finally needs to happen here to change. This cannot go on any longer.
Yes.
Something you have to make a decision. Aries is very decisive like that. It just acts. So I think that the positive energy of this is through a very painful, difficult situation, something may finally get decided because you have no other choice. And now we can move on from here. Now we're dealing with it. I think
Yeah.
it has that kind of energy in me. That's both individually for people, of course, particularly if that sits close to something in someone's chart. It's a 25 of Aries, but also collectively. I mean, there's so much drama going on this planet, in every country, everywhere.
Yeah. So just to add to that, I think, like you said, old resentments can resurface. Um, and then that weaponizes past trauma.
It can
Um,
do, yeah.
and I think the phrase that I said last time we recorded the last lunar cycle, you said, oh, bring that up again. I'd read it on Ang Stoic had written an article,
Uh-huh.
and it was when the wound demands war, and war demands healing. That's Eris,
That's powerful.
Chiron conjunct in Aries.
That's really powerful
Yeah,
when the moon demands war
war demands healing.
and war, yeah. There's so much pain on this planet to do with war, and yet there is also a reality that there is an almighty battle going on this planet on a planetary level.
Yeah,
Um, and people may not think of things this way, but it's how I see it. And it is a battle that must be won
yeah,
because there's just so much darkness here. And so, there are battles raging. And um, I just pray that, humanity and this planet come out of this and we finally bring an end to all of this.
yeah,
So we're right in the thick of it. And I think most people are aware that, a World War III is absolutely possible.
yeah,
I certainly don't see it happening, but, there are forces that would actually like that to happen. So they're
yeah,
wanting to move in that direction.
yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
think I think at the moment we're living in a time where people feel the need, I guess, and some are demanding that toxic cycles be broken. And we see this in governments, and the rot starts at the top, I'm afraid. And, there's this real sense, this deep frustration about that it's hard to break these toxic cycles. The people at the grassroots levels. um, just feel that frustration that they can't do it themselves. It's got to be people at the top who are controlling, working with the people at the top to do.
Yeah. Yeah, because they are making all these decisions that impact us all, and they have all the resources and so on and so on.
Mm,
What the people have, of course, is the sheer force of numbers, but that only works when the people are fully aware
yes.
of the real truth.
Yeah, they have to be
Yeah,
mobilized. Mm,
yeah. So it's a strong conjunction, and I think it's one that's not to be ignored. Well, these energies don't let us ignore them. They play
mm,
out in our lives whether we like it or not. And my view on these things for a long, long time now is that all these situations that arise in our life are all here to service. They're all in service to awakening, individually and collectively. All of it always is in service to that.
yeah, yeah,
So it can get rough at times. It can get really tough.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There was
Um,
also, oh, sorry, I
Go
was going
on.
to say there's also something else happening around that time too, where Saturn conjuncts Neptune, forming a minor triangle with Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini. Now, I'm no astrologer because I had to read someone else's writing about that, but I thought, oh, that's very interesting. How does that play out?
Yeah, now that's a very interesting one, and that will be something that will be in place for a few years now. This uh, it's because the three outer planets that you mentioned, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto,
Yeah.
are all moving very slowly and changing signs within 2 or so years of each other. So
Mm,
that means they're all in the first few degrees of the new signs they're moving into, and they're forming these quite harmonious, what we call sextiles, half a trine and trine. So Jupiter in early Gemini will trine Pluto in early Aquarius, and they will both form sextiles to Neptune in early Aries. And it's a shift from the recent years where these planets have been in water and earth signs, which have more of a yin feminine energy, into these more yang expressive air and fire energies. But the way I see it is that they're working together in a mutually agreeable and harmonious way
mm,
through these sextiles and trines. It's as though they had a meeting a long time ago and said, okay, at the appointed time, we're all going to get together and we're going to work together in our own particular way to really facilitate this tremendous time of, the acceleration of the shift, of the awakening, of the transformation, and really move things forward. Because there's lots of other challenging things going on. Because sometimes these planets form really hard aspects to each other over long periods of time. But here they're in this sense of this mutual agreement, and this will be really starting to come in this year as Neptune has just started to go into Aries, and in July, Uranus, of course, will begin to move into Gemini.
mm,
So this alignment, um, I think some people are calling it the grand sextile, um, will be a really interesting one to watch, and it will be in place for a few years. And then what will happen is the faster moving planets are moving through the zodiac during this period, they will come into alignment, and we might even start to see things like some beautiful Star of David patterns start to align in the sky because of these sextiles with these slower moving planets sort of sitting in place.
yeah.
I think it's a very, very positive sign.
Mm. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, well, something has to give, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Oh my gosh.
But during this period, like this year particularly, why it's so, like, people are saying, "My God, it feels like the year's over. I've So much has happened
Yeah.
just in these first few months," um, and it has. Um, it's while these planets are still in the process of changing sign this year that it's, quite intense. I think once they get into their new signs and they start to make these alignments with each other,
Mm,
that will be very helpful. I
mm,
think that will be very helpful.
mm.
And we will be, over those period of a few years, then adapting to this new energy. We're still processing, like, what the hell happened? What the hell just happened?
Yes.
We're coming out of the way it's been for a while, and it's changing so much and so fast.
Yeah.
It's quite overwhelming and exhausting in many ways.
Yeah, I was having a conversation the other day with someone and talking about, the PTSD that people, general PTSD in the population,
Yes,
everything we've been through since 2020, at least, it's, you know, it's just mind blowing, really.
it is.
And almost everyone I know says, "Oh, my sleep's not the same as it used to be. I'm not the same as I used to be. They're
Yeah,
a little bit more anxious."
yeah,
Um, there's definitely this general floating anxiety in all the people that I know, I speak to, and that's quite a
yeah,
few. And not just here. I do a lot of Zooms with people internationally, and
yeah.
they're feeling,
It's true. And I started to see, a couple of years ago when all this started to happen with the Pluto Saturn conjunction. Um, I started to see that from my perspective, it seems to me that humanity itself is suffering from collective and historical PTSD and trauma.
yeah, definitely,
When you look at humanity's history, it's been traumatic.
yeah.
And it still is in many parts of the world. And things are moving so fast. It feels like we don't have a footing. There's nothing to stand on. It feels like everything's out of control, and that's very disconcerting for us and very, makes us feel anxious. And that's why I keep coming back to, we have to find those really basic tools. Like, it's very zen. Do the dishes. When you're doing the dishes, you're just bring it right back to right here and now. Go for a walk, sit in the sun,
Mm.
pat the cat, like, as much as we can, again and again and again, to bring it back. Or we just, because when we're really stressed, we're not very anchored in our body, are we? And
Oh,
anxiety just starts to take over.
and we lose perspective of everything.
Yeah,
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 we become
yeah.
very narrow, one-eyed about things too.
That's right.
That's not
That's
nice.
right. So it's very, very big. So then, on the 30th of May, the sun will make Mercury will then join the sun at 9 degrees of Gemini. So we're going to have the sun and Mercury, moving together through Gemini. So it's a very a Gemini time. On the 2nd of June, we've been talking about Chiron and its conjunction with Eris. Venus will come in and make a conjunction with Chiron and Eris, still both sitting at 25 of Aries. So that can be quite helpful. That can bring some really softening heart energy into that,
Mm,
Chiron Eris energy,
yeah.
on the 2nd of June. On the 6th of June, Venus will leave Aries. She's kind of completed her Venus retrograde cycle from earlier in the year, and she will move into Taurus, which is very happy for Venus. Venus rules Taurus. That's gorgeous. We're going to get probably around 3, maybe 3.5 weeks of Venus relaxing, like, really just indulge yourself in some time to relax, some beauty, fill your house with flowers, go and buy yourself some new clothes, like, go and plant some beautiful things in the garden, really just enjoy those physical, sensual pleasures of life.
When you said Venus moves into Taurus, the first thing I went was, "Where's the smorgasbord?"
That's right.
And
That's right.
the chocolate cake.
Delicious, yeah, delicious food,
Mm,
like, I think we all need a bit of that, just
I do too. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm. Just
yeah, absolutely.
indulge
Go
it
on.
for a while.
Yeah. I
Mm.
mean, a lot of us have been through all sorts of emergencies, which also can drain our finances. Like, go and spend some money on something nice. Go and buy more plants or clothes or go out to lunch. Let's, it's like really treating our human self and looking after our human self with a bit of care and lusciousness, which is very Taurus.
I could certainly relate to that because just recently I've spent $9,000 on digging up pipes, right? But would I go out and spend $9,000 on myself? No,
No,
and I never do, or even $1,000. I just don't.
no, we don't. That's exactly right. And
Yeah,
when you're doing it on something like digging up pipes, even when it's all finished, you're not going to see anything, particularly for all that money you
no,
just spent
just
because it's
the
underground.
just the sound of water no longer gurgling in the basin. So,
That's right. But it had to be done.
yes.
That's exactly right.
Mm,
So I love that. Venus going into the sign of Taurus. On the 9th of June, Mercury will be conjunct Jupiter. Now, this is really interesting because Jupiter is coming to the end of Gemini. And on the 9th, Mercury comes to the end of Gemini, and Mercury conjuncts Jupiter at 29 degrees 45 minutes that'll be of Gemini. That'll be a very mercurial day. But on the same day, Mercury then will exit Gemini and go into Cancer. And on the following day, drum roll please, Jupiter leaves Gemini where it's been for a year
mm,
and will move into Cancer. So there's another change of energy. And it will be, as Jupiter moves into Gemini, it's accompanied by Mercury, which is interesting.
mm,
And that's the day before the full moon, actually.
mm. So
So
when Jupiter goes into Cancer, that's right in time for our winter, and we just want to stay home and be around the hearth, don't we? Around the fireplace.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So Cancer, Jupiter, of course, brings expansion and increase. And I always think of the word more, like, that Jupiter part of us says, yeah, I want more of that. Thanks. I'll have more. And in Cancer, it's all about like home, family, coziness, nurturing, support,
Cooking.
warmth and affection, and cooking and
Ah,
food.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's nice for us here in the Southern Hemisphere.
Mm,
We can just kind of cozy up. And, Cancerians by nature, in most cases, it depends on where it sits in their chart, um, they're happy staying at home. They're
mm,
often not that inclined to want to be out and about very much,
mm,
you know.
mm,
And I was thinking about Jupiter in Cancer and someone I know very well, one of my sisters actually. I mean, she's such a mother, she just had her first grandbaby and she's just totally besotted. But she also, when she retired from teaching primary school children, she started volunteering with the food bank,
mm,
right? So Jupiter has this magnanimous generosity when it's operating well
mm,
to want to give back to life. Like I feel like I've got enough and I want to give back to life. And it's a kind of a spiritual aspiration in a way. Jupiter's got a lot to do with our
mm.
spiritual aspirations. In Cancer, it's about, well, how can I help these people who don't have very much, and I have enough and I can give something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So wanting to just give food to people who need food or they don't have enough blankets or, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, there was a young man who was driving around, probably paddling around where all the floods are happening in New South Wales, just asking people, "Do you need help? Can I do something for you? How can I
Mm,
support you?" That sort of
yeah.
thing. Yeah, that's
And
a
I've noticed over the years, and I think many of us have, when there are these big disasters that impact communities in a huge way, what do other people do? They step up so fast
yeah,
and roll up their sleeves. They if they can't get there physically to help, they send money.
yeah,
People naturally want to, people are good at heart and people
they
want
are.
to help. And I do feel that when Jupiter moves through Cancer from the 10th of June for the following 12 to 13 months, I think we're going to see a lot of that because, the word is it's going to be some pretty ongoing, big, natural, not natural, events like that
Mm,
that will impact people in a very personal way,
yeah.
but people will help. And it can bring out, I think that Jupiter will bring out the best in people in that way.
Mm, mm,
Yeah.
mm.
So
Interesting.
that will be, and it's a great opportunity when on the day that a planet's changing sign or even around that first week or so to just observe, notice how you feel,
Mm,
what are you experiencing, what's going on in your own life, what are you seeing around you, and it gives you a really good insight
mm.
into that energy because it's a noticeable change of energy, like something's changed.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Is there more?
Um,
I don't think there is more, is there?
no, because that brings us to the full moon.
Yes.
Um, in Sagittarius and Gemini. So that's going to be your full moon, we could say.
What?
Well, yes. Well, no, in reverse actually. It's your full moon in reverse, isn't it?
So,
Because the moon will be in Sagittarius.
okay, right. Good-o. Well, yippee.
Yeah. So that's a high energy full moon. They're high energy signs and they will be square the nodes of the moon, which are in Cancer and Virgo. It's quite a tight square,
Mm,
actually, just a couple of degrees. So that full moon will be very, very mutable,
mm.
so there'll be a lot of movement and change and
Yep.
yeah, a
Mm.
lot of stimulating things going on.
Well, I look forward to that, I think.
It feels it feels a little bit like I don't know, it feels like that part of the cycle as we come into Jupiter and Cancer and that full moon, it feels to me a little bit easier. I mean, we are in a big year, but it feels a little bit softer somehow,
Mm, yeah,
and that full moon could just be, a bit of fun, bit of enjoyment, um, but also very stimulating informationally wise, knowledge wise.
yeah, yeah.
Good time for publishing things, writing things.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
I'll keep that in mind. Well, are we finished? Is that a wrap?
I think that's a wrap. I think
Great.
that's a wrap, and we can continue on after that next time.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Babula, for sharing that information.
You're
Much
welcome.
appreciated on behalf of all the listeners and watchers. And everyone, remember, if you enjoyed this episode, please like it. And if you want to, share it. And if you want to hear more, remember to subscribe and tap the bell so you get notifications when these are published on YouTube. So until next time, everyone, um, take care. We'll see you again in another 2 weeks for the next lunar cycle. So for
Thank you,
now, bye
Cheryl.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.